The air along the banks of the little tributary of the Chianthar had grown warm with music and laughter. Zevlor may have proposed a celebration of everyone's efforts, but the excitement had doubled with each invited party until a veritable riverside festival had emerged. Lutes were plucked and fiddles bowed between toasts and speeches from speakers of varying degrees of inebriation. Tiefling children laughed and darted to and fro, chastised occasionally by flaming fists, who, while at ease and ordered to enjoy themselves by Councillor Floric, still had a sense of duty to upholding the general order. The reclusive druids had followed Halsin's lead and emerged from the grove to join the festivities. Even those who had wished to seal the grove for good had come along, choosing to view the whole affair as a bon voyage. One horned figure stood alone at a crumbling rocky outcropping jutting out into the stream, where the water began to lazily spread to join the Chianthar no more than 100 meters off. "You know, the brooding loner look doesn't suit you," Simon called, stepping carefully over the rocks that Will had settled on. "Oh, didn't notice you there," Will said, turning back to his goblet. "I guess I'm just not feeling in a festive mood," he sighed. "I didn't want to cast a grey cloud over the night." "Do you want to talk about it?" Simon asked, sitting next to him and offering his bottle. Will waved it off for the moment. "I don't know. So much has happened in the past few days. My father was kidnapped by a cult. I was transformed against my will. Possibly I'll be transformed again if we don't make it to moonrise." Will sighed. "I'm proud of what we've done and how much we've helped these people, but I just don't feel much like dancing." "Do you dance?" Simon asked, trying to keep things light. Well, I do. Ballroom dance, mostly. I once beat the Baldurian record for the most sarabands danced in a single evening." Will laughed. "Father brought me up at court. Hours of lessons." Will trailed off, sighing. "Life was so much simpler when all I had to worry about was who I was going to dance with at a ball." "Believe me, I sympathize," Simon nodded. "Dancing at a party's the only time I ever felt like I belonged to only me," he said with a wistful smile. "And I wasn't an awkward, gangly young man with eccentric taste for once, but a fashionable, elegant elven dancer, someone who everyone wanted to partner with. Some girls had even tried to pull me onto the floor for women's-only dances." He laughed. "I saw you, I know," Will laughed, elbowing Simon gently. "Gods, I've always loved the season in the gate," Simon sighed. "My heart is in Fontdale, of course, but I do so love the city, too." "Come on, just one dance," Simon asked, nudging Will gently. "For old time's sake. One patriarch lost in the wilds to another." Will offered an apologetic smile. "I'm not much of a patriarch anymore. Less so now. I'm a devil. I'd only upset people," he said softly, his gaze turning away. "You're not a devil," Simon insisted. "Tieflings aren't devils. I'm surprised at you, Will." No, don't misunderstand," Will replied, his brows shooting up. "Tieflings are born as they are, or they're victims of circumstance. It's no fault of their own. But me—" He sighed, reaching up to feel the scar tissue on his ears, cropped by Mizora into their former human shape. "It is my fault. I made my bed, and so I must lie in it. Alone." Simon frowned, his gaze shifting out over the water. "We really need to renegotiate your terms. Has Astarion had a look at your contract yet, or was that all just banter?" "Mizora would have to provide me a copy first, and she's not particularly forthcoming about it," Will muttered glumly. "He did walk with me around camp a few times the other night, though, after hunting. Bit unsettling, chatting with a man with blood running down his front, but, well, he knows a thing or two about being changed against your will. I didn't expect compassion from him." I suspect it's because there was no one else around to watch him, Simon chuckled. Even our prickliest companions could be surprisingly sweet in private. But his normal bitterness and spice is such an acquired taste, Will replied. Along with the iron, I assume. What can I say? I'm a masochist, Simon smirked. I've spent evenings with Lae'zel and Shadowheart, too, after all. You really are a diplomat, aren't you? Will smiled. I'd rather be a diplomat than a politician, Simon said playfully, pulling a face. Although, really, we ought to be looking for a way to get you out of your contract. Mizora seems like she's getting far more out of this arrangement than you. Yeah. When it was just hunting demons and monsters, it didn't seem so bad, all in all. Now, I can't help but wonder about all the other targets I blindly chased on her orders. Were they all legitimate? Was there more than met the eye for them, too, like with Karlak? Will asked, chewing his lip. You see why I don't want to join the others. Even whiskey's humours haven't drowned my sorrows or raised my joy quite yet. Simon peered into Will's empty goblet and started to fill it from his own wine bottle. We really don't do this sort of thing where I'm from, but have you considered a new patron? You want me to sign over what little I've got left to another devil? Will asked, pulling his goblet back and frowning at Simon. No, Simon said, waving his hand lightly. I'm saying have a more powerful patron acquire your contract. Protect you from her wrath. Mizora's just a petty middleman, after all. A handler mediating between you and the real source of power, Zariel. Skimming power and influence off the top in both directions. She has an agenda, Simon said, letting that point hang in the air for a moment. Hadar does not. Silence stretched between them. Hadar, your lord, Will stated rather than asked. Yes. Hadar has been good to me, to my family. My ancestor, Roland, made a pact with him and fulfilled the terms, so he was rewarded both in this life and the next. With his material rewards, Roland built a grand temple in Hadar's name and pledged his new lands to his lord. For this, he was blessed, and our family blessed for 7 generations. I'm the 6th, so blessed. Simon smiled, his gaze falling a little sheepishly. Hadar's ways are strange, and he is cold, but he is good to us. He has little in the way of an agenda, unlike other gods. And especially patrons, Simon added knowingly. He already knows you, has known you, will continue knowing you. Time and causality break down somewhat in his presence. When Mizora taught you how to call on him, the wave function changed to include you. He didn't always know you, but now he has always known, and so shall know. Will furrowed his brows as he tried to parse Simon's language. The strange tenses, the question of time, the thought that the feeling he'd had for a few nights now of being watched may not have been far off. You know, Simon continued with a smile, when we first met, I thought you might have been one of his followers who had not yet reached the temple. You called on him in the first fight we partook in. Do you remember? Yeah, I do, Will replied, letting him carry on. And he answered. You've called on him at my side a few times now, and he sees us. Try calling to him in a time of peace, a time of quiet. He may just look upon you. You will know that he has heard you, Simon insisted softly. If you reach out to him, he may choose to reach back. He may take you into his confidence. He may ask you for something, and he may give you something in return. He offers many boons to his warlocks, and even more to his faithful. You don't have to worship him. I know you said you're not a man of faith, but he could grant you more. What's his price? Will asked, suspicion heavy in his tone. He knows what he needs. He knows what you can provide. That is what he asks of you, Simon replied cryptically. Well, what did he ask from you? Will asked, tipping his head lightly to one side, now far more used to the extra weight of his horns. Simon hesitated, his emerald gaze scanning the river's surface for a moment. I'm not a warlock, he began, hoping he didn't sound terribly evasive. I'm his cleric. In exchange for his gifts, he has my life. All that I am, Simon said, his tone slow, soft, reverent. I was both blessed by and sworn to him before I was born. My first trials of faith were before I can remember. But I grew up in his embrace, set on the path to be his cleric from before my first breath, he said, smiling. But what does that mean, Simon, to be sworn to him? I had to give up my eye to Mizora, had to... Will's tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth as he danced too close to the edge. Damn. Hate it when she does that, he muttered, his tongue suddenly aching and sore. She stops you from speaking? Simon asked, eyes wide. I'm forbidden to speak of the terms of my pact, Will sighed. Hadar seeks completion, Simon began softly. In barbaric days of old, those called to worship Hadar would, in their madness, sacrifice whole beings to him, body, mind, and soul. We no longer practice such rites. We offer him the fruits of our gardens, memories, thoughts, feelings, and knowledge cultivated for sacrifice, and feed him these fruits. We share pieces of what we are with him, and make him more and more complete. We live for him, rather than dying or killing for him now. Although, Simon trailed off, looking back to Will. In times of war and strife, we do offer our enemies a sacrifice. This he will ask of you. This he asked of me just today. That's not so unusual for a pact, Will murmured. I suppose I'll just have to see for myself, won't I? Indeed. But I leave you to that in your own time, Simon said, rising from his place on the rock. And I'd appreciate if you kept this between us, he added. Like I said, where I'm from, we don't share our faith with outsiders. It's too risky, worshipping a strange god no one else recognizes. But you are a good man, Will Ravengard. I trust you. He smiled, turning away. Enjoy the evening. Right, thanks, Will said, slowly swirling the wine in his goblet as Simon retreated. Simon was right. His god was strange and cold. But Simon had been oddly vulnerable with him just now, sharing those details, and he had reached out to Hadar before. Perhaps it was time to speak to it. Simon wound his way through the crowd, catching snatches of conversation as the adventurers locked up in Ethel's house of horrors caught up on the last 10, 20, 200 years of history of the Heartlands. His smile widened as he caught sight of Karlak, happily clinking her mug against those of tieflings and fists, and even an occasional druid who strayed from the private groups on the outskirts of the party. Few stayed, however, The heat from her heart was a shock to those who weren't used to her. Simon approached, and Karlak quickly waved him over, grinning. "Look at all these people," Karlak said, her heart glowing bright in her chest as she spoke. "Happy because of us." "Indeed. Commendable work on the field today, Karlak. Thank you." Simon smiled, offering her his bottle. "Oh, I'd better not. I'm sticking to dwarven stuff tonight. The alcohol doesn't all boil away under high temperatures," she laughed. "Fair point," Simon smiled, settling for simply clinking his wine bottle against her flagon of ale. "I'm just glad to be in a world where good is possible again," Karlak sighed. "Still halfway scared someone's going to stab me in the back, but not as much as Astarion, I'm betting." "Speaking of which, you and Astarion," she teased, grinning. "What? What about me and Astarion?" Simon asked, his cheeks flushed. "Two of you were missing last night." It's just..." Simon sputtered. "Hey, I don't blame you. I'm hoping to find a fire-retardant friend for a quick snog myself," she grinned, elbowing him and pulling her arm back quickly to avoid singeing him. "Well, there are plenty of other tieflings here tonight," Simon remarked, clearing his throat. "That infernal mechanic, Damon, was it?" "Oh, he'd just be looking at my chest all evening, not even in the fun way," Karlak sighed. "Although he does know his way around an engine. Should probably talk to him even if it's just business. Make sure he picks up that stuff we found for him on the way out of here. Set up an appointment for my next tune-up in the city, things like that." "That's not a bad idea. We should all be planning for a future after we handle the tadpoles," Simon nodded sagely. "Hope is a powerful motivator." "Yeah. What are you going to do if we take care of the creepy crawlies?" Karlak asked. "I'm going to hug my son very, very tightly," Simon said immediately. Karlak choked on her ale for a moment. "Your son?" Karlak coughed. "Yes," Simon smiled, reaching up and clutching his locket tight. "Sorry, you just, didn't strike me as the kind of guy with kids," Karlak said, gesturing to him vaguely. "If you know what I mean." "Believe me, you're not the first to say that," Simon sighed. "My father-in-law was convinced we were never going to have children after just a year. As if I'm not a busy man. As if these things don't take time," Simon said. "So you're married and have a kid? Wow. You're changing everything I thought I knew about you," Karlak said before raising a brow. "So you and Astarion..." "I don't imagine Astarion's looking for anything long-term, if his manner with me this morning was anything to go by," Simon sighed. "Blood and a pleasant diversion here in the woods," he murmured, his gaze falling. "That's what he's looking for." "And what are you looking for, soldier?" she asked, tipping her head curiously. Simon considered her question, looking down into the bottle for a long moment. "Companionship, I think," Simon said, his voice soft. "If we might die any day, I'd like to have spent time with an interesting companion." "Be careful," Karlak said, giving Simon another, more gentle touch on the arm, but still pulling back quickly to avoid burning him. "Believe me, I'd ride Astarion to the Feywild and back if I had the chance, but I'd hate to see you get hurt. Although, seems like you know what you're getting into anyway. Just don't let him break your heart. He seems like he's got a lot of experience in that arena." "Indeed. I think I've tempered my expectations," Simon said. "I've not had much companionship in my life, and expecting it now would be foolhardy on my part. So I'll settle for debauchery, it seems." Simon came away from where the drinks were being doled out with a refilled goblet and a patch of his sleeve needing careful cleaning with magic. He paused when he found himself overshadowed, staring up at Halsin. His broad frame seemed quite relaxed, and he gazed out over the camp like he was observing a prize rose garden. Simon cleared his throat, and Halsin quickly turned his attention. "Oh, Simon, was it? Well met," Halsin said, offering a polite smile. Their first meeting had been under rather strange circumstances after all, so a fresh start seemed reasonable. "Good work convincing the Druids to join us." Simon smiled up at Halsin. "They deserve an evening of celebration for their patience and grace." "And thank you for allowing all of these revelers into your camp," Halsin chuckled, gesturing to the crowd. "Your generosity will not be forgotten." "Were I back in Baldur's Gate now, I'd be at dinners and balls and soirees every evening. Strangely enough, this is the most normal I've felt in nearly a 10-day. Simon laughed. "Likewise." Halsin smiled, drinking deeply from his cup. Simon could smell that it was just water sweetened with honey, the drinks they'd prepared for the children. "To see the sky, to smell the fresh air, to hear the waters of the stream." His eyes slid shut for a long moment as he soaked in the warm summer evening. "This is where I belong. Bear or not," he smiled. "I hate to bring the subject back round to business, but you will be accompanying us to Moonrise, yes? Will the grove be all right without you?" Simon asked. "Korga is under control. She fought well today, and as long as a strong, steady hand guides her, I think she will not grow twisted and stunted. It was too much responsibility I laid on her shoulders. I'll divide those duties among—" "Oh, what am I talking about?" Halsin said, shaking his head. "This isn't the time to worry about that, or Moonrise. We can discuss that in the morning. Go. Mingle with your guests. Don't let me monopolize your time." "Don't be silly, you're a guest of honor," Simon smiled back, daring to lay a warm touch to Halsin's bicep. "Please, won't you share a drink with me?" "Oh, I don't imbibe much anymore," Halsin said. "It goes right to my head. Before long I'd be breaking into song or declaring my love to whomever crossed my path." He smiled politely. "I'm failing to see the problem," Simon chuckled. "You've never heard me sing, which makes you very fortunate," Halsin said, his smile growing a little more genuine. Simon laughed along prettily, shaking his head and brushing a bit of hair from his eyes. "Well, I'll not force spirit down your throat," Simon said. "I do hope you enjoy yourself, even as the crowd grows inebriate. I'll be ready to talk in the morning." "Very well. Enjoy the fruits of your labor, and I'll see you in the morning," Halsin nodded, turning back to his cup and observing the crowd quietly. "Simon!" Lae'zel called, the revelers parting as she approached with a determined expression. "Oh? What can I do for you, Lae'zel?" Simon asked as Halsin excused himself upon her approach. "I have a confession. I was too hasty to judge you. I thought you witless, gutless, unimpressively bland." "That's rather hurtful. I should hope I'd have at least been able to appear clever if I were not," Simon said. "I presume a compliment is incoming?" "Indeed. You've proven your wits. You have earned my respect, and more still. You are efficient and dominant in and out of battle. You've proven your courage. I've seen the Kithraki terror screaming Neogi's legs from its belly to fashion into blades, yet they could not match your nerve in battle today. I smell their blood on you. I smell your sweat. It makes the hairs on my neck stand on end," Lae'zel said, her normally matter-of-fact tone taking on a rather more hungry edge. Simon froze, momentarily stunned. "Hang on, are you... What are you implying?" Simon asked, incredulous. "I am being quite plain. I want to taste you," she said with a hungry curl of the lip. "Do you?" "I'm flattered, truly," Simon began, "but I think one tasting me now is quite enough." "Bah! It is your loss to not share in the flesh of a warrior rarely tasted. Enjoy yourself this night. I still intend to. Will looks particularly tempting, she said, turning and striding off into the revelers. Simon thought for a moment that perhaps he should warn Will, and his fingers rose to his earring, but he dropped his hand. He could let Will come to his own decision. Might even be good for him in some fashion. A tangle of tiefling children had amassed around Gale, eagerly chattering amongst themselves.
"Show us how!"
one of the children cried, elbowing their way towards the front of the pack.
"Yeah, show us!" "Please, Roland won't teach us. I want to shoot sparks at my brother."
Now, I can't say I condone that specific use of magic, but I can certainly teach you how to channel the weave. Gale smiled warmly. What are you going to teach us? Simon asked, handing his bottle off to a passerby. Let's start with the basics. One of the most important things on the road is a wizard's basic toolkit. Prestidigitation, Gale said with a skillful wiggle of his fingers, sending a shower of multicolored sparks soaring overhead, much as Roland had done earlier. The faintest tinkling of music filled the air, along with the captivating scent of rosewater and old books. Captivating to Simon, anyway. The children seemed less taken with the olfactory demonstration, focused instead on the sights and sounds. With it, you can light your campfire, wash and dry your socks, make your soup taste better, mark where you've been, create colorful illusions. The possibilities are limited only by your imaginations, he said in a stage whisper. So, who wants to learn a magic trick? The children clambered closer, piling close as they plopped down on the ground in front of Gale as though gathered in a proper classroom. Simon dropped to the ground as well, looking to the children next to him. Maybe I'll finally get the hang of it with a proper teacher, he whispered, winking playfully. Now, follow my lead, Gale smiled, shaking out his hands and laughing softly as the children quickly imitated him. When you're just learning, make your motions big, but careful. Like a big clap, but stop just short. Follow me. Slow, he said, leading his class in the motions. Just so. Now, whatever you want to make happen, a sound, a smell, a taste, an image, imagine it appearing between your hands in that space. You wouldn't want to squish it, so don't finish the clap. Instead, pull your hands apart like you're setting it free and... Gale drew his hands apart elegantly, and a purplish orb glimmered in the firelight before dissipating like shimmering smoke. Let it go out into the world, he smiled. Right, now let's all try together. Quick, think of your favorite color. Mine's blue, Simon whispered, leaning down to the child next to him. But sometimes green.
I like pink,
the little girl replied, smiling. Pink suits you, Simon nodded sagely. Now, close your eyes and think of a fluffy, happy little cloud in your favorite color, so small it can fit between your hands. You got your clouds? Excellent. Keep those little clouds in your mind and repeat these magic words. Athran mistra ril kantrak eo. The muttering and stammering was a thick soup of chaos around Simon, the weave being pushed and pulled feebly in all directions. Let's try it slow, like with the clap. Repeat after me. Athran. Good. Mistra ril. Yes. Kantrak eo. Simon, can you say it all together? Gale asked, grinning at the other wizard. I think so. Athran mistra ril. Kantrak eo? Simon offered, playing up his concentration. Excellent work, top marks, Gale smiled. Everyone, all together now, he said, leading the children in the basic chant. The repeated words, more focused, began tugging the weave, all in the same direction, more or less as one. This is one of the most talented classes I've ever taught, Gale praised, earning a few giggles. Right, let's put it all together now. The hands, the words, and the clouds. As you say the words, bring your hands close for that big clap, and imagine your cloud appearing between your hands as they come closer and closer together. But remember, don't squish your cloud. When you finish the words, Let your cloud friend go. Ready to try?" The air was soon filled with children's voices incanting at various pitches and volumes, some forcefully, others fearfully. Some hesitated far too much on the hand motions, while others followed through with big claps and sheepish looks as they reset to try again.
"I got it!"
A young girl cried as a green cloud shimmered and drifted into the air before her, dissipating gently in the warm evening breeze. Simon smiled almost as broadly as Gale as he saw who the talented student was. The girl from the grove, Arabella. Soon other little glittering clouds joined hers, puffs of joy fading pleasantly like the sound of drifting laughter. "Excellent! You're channeling the weave. How does it feel?" Gale asked, looking around at the children, their tails thrashing between them in excitement.
"This is so cool! I'm gonna make a big one!"
Another child laughed. "You can do more than just clouds. Imagine instead dandelion fluff, or a butterfly. Sounds, too. You can make the sound of your hands clapping without them ever touching at all," Gale said, moving toward a child who seemed to be having some difficulty with just the cloud exercise. Several minutes passed of clouds, butterflies, and flower petals, before soon little showers of sparks and minute thunderclaps sounded, mingling with the drifting scent of apple pie and home-cooked meals. The broad gestures quickly grew smaller, quicker. Soon some were even casting with finger snaps amid peals of laughter and impressed cries. "You're a great teacher, you know," Simon smiled, watching as the tiefling children ran off, snapping colorful little sparks between their fingers that smelled of lilac and jasmine, but quickly devolved into the scents and sounds of various bodily gases amid other sophomoric displays. "I had great teachers when I was young," Gale smiled back. "You had to back in those days." "Indeed," Simon nodded, his tone solemn, though he kept a warm smile. "I was tutored by a Cormyran war wizard who wasn't driven mad. Had quite enough madness already back home," he added with a knowing chuckle. "That was before I went to the war college myself, of course." "I was wondering where you'd studied," Gale said. "Your style's different from other wizards from the Dales I've known." "I'm afraid I don't know many other Dalefolk wizards," Simon shrugged. "Really? When you're so close to Shadowdale?" Gale asked, his eyebrows shooting up. "You don't know Elminster?" "Of course I know of him," Simon replied. "Elminster, Storm. The number of Mistress chosen in the Dales is phenomenal. But you're the first I've ever met in person." He sighed. "We've never been received at guests in the Tower of Shadowdale, and my invitations to visit Silver Spring have never been accepted." "More's the pity. Elminster's a phenomenal after-dinner raconteur," Gale said. "He's lived a lifetime's worth of adventures." "Oh, I can only imagine," Simon sighed wistfully. "I keep hoping that someday I'll discover the proper cheese and wine combination to finally tempt him to visit my estate." "Good luck. It's not what you think," Gale laughed. Simon pulled an unopened bottle of wine from a nearby crate and pulled the cork out with a soft pop, taking a swig. "I wanted to thank you for the dramatic rescue today," Simon said, looking down at the bottle. "And I must apologize for my recent behavior with you, Gale. I must have seemed quite mercurial to you and hard to work with." "It's all right. We never quite know how we're going to react in the face of certain death until we find ourselves there," Gale said. "And in our current line of work we can find ourselves there many times. Regardless, I've been very hot and cold with you, and that is unfair and cruel of me. You're a handsome man, and I acted like a foolish love-struck youth. You're similarly affected by Nethery's magic as my region was, and I looked at you like an enemy. I beg your pardon for my treatment of you these past few days," Simon said, lowering himself to one knee in contrition. "You list your flaws in a heavy hand, Lord Fontdale," Gale began, quickly falling into the courtly rhythm that Simon had taken. "So let me speak of your graces, not the least of which is saving my life on at least 2 occasions, for which I've only repaid you once. You're a man of both faith and reason. You weigh your options with great care and calculation, and though you were born above most of us, you do not disregard us as unworthy peasants. You've brought us together into this little parliament of yours, and look at the fruits our efforts bear. These dozens of lives that we've touched. The camaraderie, the peace, Gale said, resting a hand on Simon's shoulder. In light of your many fine qualities and your sincerity, I accept your apology and consider you not just an ally, but a friend. Simon rose, following Gale's words, positively beaming. I'm proud to be counted among your friends, Gale, he said, chest swelling. The only thing more dangerous than a rivalry between two wizards is a friendship between two wizards. Truer words have rarely been spoken, Gale smiled. Here's my little treat with his cheeks all flushed, Astarion teased, appraising Simon's appearance as he approached. A bit of wine had splashed on him at some point, leaving a dark stain on one sleeve, and his carefully coiffed hair had begun to relax over the course of the evening. He certainly did look delectable, cheeks warmed from wine and his smile wide. Little treat? Simon asked, laughing. I'm not that little. Come now, you can do better, he said with a wink and a giggle. The atmosphere of the evening was certainly having an effect on him. Oh, I certainly can, Astarion smirked. It would be my pleasure, he purred. He made a bit of a show of considering his next line, watching Simon. He'd seen many people offering themselves to one another tonight, offering themselves to him and earning quick rebuffs, offering themselves to Simon as well, much to his own jealous discontent. However, while he'd seen people pairing off and ducking into tents and out into the woods, Simon remained dressed and present. If Astarion had played his cards right, and he was quite certain he had, he should be able to secure his protection tonight. After all, he'd proved his usefulness. But so had Lae'zel, and she was not in a particularly favored position. But he could be. He could sit at Simon's right hand, pour his wine, flatter him, bed him when necessary, and unless they crossed paths with Cazador, he would be guaranteed security, blood, entertainment. Simon might not be such a bad master to serve. He already held the reins loosely with all of them. How about this one? All these accolades from the tieflings are nothing compared to the sound of my name cried from your lips, he offered. Astarion could see the pink in Simon's ears and the subtle swell in his trousers at the recollection of their previous night together. It had been a rather wonderful sound, and far more appealing than all this baying and cackling. So many honeyed words as usual, Simon laughed, offering his own courtly giggle. He had to up the ante. Not half as sweet as when I tasted you, Astarion purred, earning a more honest chuckle. Interesting. He did always seem to enjoy their repartee. Wizards and their word games. Let me give it another go. Every part of your perfect body whispers temptation. It is as if the gods made you just to ruin me. Simon gave him a suspicious narrowing of his eyes, along with a wry little grin. Laying it on a little thick, aren't you? I've seen my body, you know. Oh yes, my lithe, long-limbed lover, Astarion chuckled, taking a teasing step forward. I liked what I saw. And I think you did too, he added, displaying himself a bit. Really now, I could go all night with the flattery, but is that really all you want from me? How about if I said these 3 little words? Everyone's favorite. Astarion smirked, watching Simon's expression carefully. I love you. Oh, why did he say it like that? 3 little words indeed, tripping off the tongue with more than a touch of truth to them. What in the hell's had gotten into him besides the wine? But Simon did not blush, did not laugh and turn away coyly like he had before when Astarion had teased him with words like lover and darling. He froze instead, his eyes darting, searching Astarion's face. "Are you having a go?" Simon asked, his voice shaking slightly, his grip on his wine bottle tight. "Perhaps. It's so easy to tease you, darling," Astarion tittered, quickly backpedaling. "But there's no reason it can't be true, if only for tonight." He offered his usual smirk, a suggestive brow, but Astarion found in that moment he wasn't looking at Simon any longer. He was looking at Lord Fontdale, stern, sober, and guarded, and hurt. "Well, that is quite cruel even for you," Simon said, holding his voice as steady as he could. "Please don't play with my heart like this." "Excuse me," Simon said, turning and leaving through the celebrating crowd. Through the mingling bodies of a group of tieflings, Astarion spotted Simon's retreating form, his pace quickening as he escaped to the seclusion of that little crumbling shrine. "Shit,"